There was one question before we had started, and that is, in meditation, sometimes I sit and then the attention goes off. My mind wanders. And then before I know it, then I have to bring it back. So I struggle with that, was one question from somebody here. My first reaction is, welcome to the human race, because all of us are meditating. It's just that. It's like the mind is like leaves on a tree. If we don't deliberately structure our attention and direct it deliberately, then it'll be subject to the wind. It can blow left or right or up and down. And so the important thing is that that is a part of the meditation process, is to watch the mind and see where is it going. And when the attention wanders, to let it go for a little sniffing, like a dog sniffing its surrounding, and bring it back. The main thing is to notice it. And then the questioner said, yes, but it takes some time before it wanders and wanders. It's to be attentive to it. Now, even Ramakrishna, the most seasoned meditator we know, he recalls, I was sitting, meditating, and my mind wandered off to the house of Rusik, the one devotee, see. So even his mind wandered. But the point is, he noticed it. My mind wandered. My mind is wandering. There it goes. Like a kind of dog. Oh, it's gone that way. I have to whistle and call it back. Then if that is such a distracting thing, occupying your mind, why don't you take that as your theme for meditation? Because we can pick up a theme for meditation on anything, on a table, on a chair, on a leaf, on a tree, on a person, on a sound, because when you trace it back, you're going from the gross to the more subtle, until you arrive at the source of everything, that in Vedanta we call Brahman. So that's dealing with that kind of question. But the subject for this evening is living Vedanta. When we talk about the Vedanta philosophy, very often we may fall into the temptation of seeing that it is a philosophy that employs a lot of logic, a lot of reasoning, a lot of thinking, a lot of verifications, many things. None of these are from the heart. All of them are from the head. And so we have to bring the contents of the head into the heart to make it a living, practical thing. Otherwise, what use is it? No doubt we require the principles. So what are the principles? Then we have to explore what do we mean by Vedanta and break it down. So most of you know what Vedanta is, but let's do it again and see. The word Vedanta, there has two roots to it. Vid, to know, to see. We use the word when we say video, something that is seen, or vision. All this comes from the same Indo-European root, the Sanskrit root, vid, to know and to see. Why would we employ this? Because whatever is true should really be validated by seeing it, either with the eyes or the ears or any of the other senses, hopefully multisensory. That's to do with the external world. And it's not that simple, because things are not exactly what they seem to be. The mistake that we all make, according to Vedanta, is we take this world as an actual world, not as a mithya, not as an apparitional world, a shadow world, as it were. We take it to be absolutely real. Well, it's real, no doubt, from a relative point of view, but absolutely real, no. Something that is absolutely real will never change. It will always remain the same. It was 1,000 years ago, 1,000,000 years ago, it is now, and it will always be. This is the nature of the unchanging. Now, modern science takes some things as unchanging, but very irrationally, it takes laws to be unchanging. the laws of nature, from the point of view of most scientists, will be it's immutable, which seems illogical because the next question is, well, where are these coming from? Why should they be immutable? Why should we accept this? And so we all have this point of view where we may accept something as a source without proper investigation. But thousands of years ago, there were people that we call rishis, that is, those people who saw, seers of mantras, seers of thought, seers of the subtle thing, because they were scientifically minded. They wanted to investigate what is all of this. And when they say all of this, it's kind of a wave of a hand that encompasses all the objects of the universe, as far as we understand, as far as we know. And in doing that, they constructed Vedas. Not books, but truths that they felt were revealed. But there are two types of truths that can be revealed: an external truth, an internal one. You can even say three, a more internal one. So now, if we don't find any satisfactory answers in the external world, we have to go to the next inner subtle layer, the world of the psyche. Can we find it in the mind? And if we don't find any satisfaction there, we have to go a little further until we come to a point where we cannot go anymore. And so they started investigating what is all of this. And in doing that, two sections, as it were, two sections of thought developed, as I mentioned, external and internal. And the external one starts off with a sense of admiration and wonder, acknowledging different forces which are there, and going into a sense of rapture about it, a sense of poetry, a sense of praise for all the forces which are there, and delineating a means, a method of expressing yourself called ritual. Not just to express yourself, but also to gain some kind of benefit. Because if I now align myself, attune myself, pray to these forces, then things will be good for me in this life, but more significant in the next life also. Now this is called karma kanda, to do karma, actions, rituals. And it is to do with your quality of life here and hereafter for yourself and for society in general. That's fine. But it doesn't really answer the deepest questions. And so they addressed it at a deeper level. And that deeper level we call Vedanta. The end, anta, the end of what is to be known and seen. The end of the Vedas, literally the final conclusion of what is understood, that is Vedas. So we have this understanding, this glue that holds people adhering to the Vedanta philosophy, Vedanta, the philosophy of Hinduism. But you see, when we say Hinduism, we're talking of a vast array of expressive ways. We're looking at a vast arrays of thought, vast arrays of interpretations, vast range of theologies, vast range of traditions and customs, and all of them are a kind of family, but with one glue holding it all together. And that is, they all believe in the authority of these Vedas. And that authority means they all believe in the Vedanta as the undercurrent. Now you may interpret this Vedanta in many different ways. But the point is, if you are to be orthodox, that is Ashtika, then you adhere to the authority of the Vedas. Now there are other schools of thought which are Nashtika, that are not orthodox. For example, the great Buddha, Vaishak is the celebration we have today. And so Buddha got his enlightenment and so on, without referring apparently to the Vedas. He started off afresh with great courage, great determination, with no map, no compass. He decided to explore, as the ancient rishis explored, what is the nature of what we call nature itself. there must be something underlying, some causal factor which is driving it from within. And the outside is just what we see on the surface of the surface of a wave. But can I find out what is the ocean? And when I do, will it give me a state of buddhi, a state of enlightened intellect? Enlightened buddhi, illumination, described in various ways, maybe negative, maybe positive, described by the yogis as samadhi, described by the Vedantins as Brahma Nirvana, described by the Buddhists as Nirvana. A kind of negation that I have done away with all these sources of sufferings. And where are they? They're in terms of desires. What do I mean by that? If I take this external world to be serious, to be the only existence, then I feel I want to do my best. I want to strive toward perfection in everything I do. But if my interpretation of the world is only as a small fenced-in area consisting of me, my body, my circumstances, my resources, my external world that I relate to, then we can draw a circle around that and make a sphere of it and say, this is a very limited thing, like a small bubble amongst so many bubbles, which will burst at one point, and all meaning that that bubble ever had will disappear. This is the materialistic point of view, which says the material universe is our reality. But how can it be? It changes. It has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end, and if it's like a soap bubble, it bursts and goes into a state of annihilation. Well, Vedanta philosophy says, no, it's not like that at all. This bubble that you have is a myth. No doubt it comes and goes, but there's something that always remains the same. And so there is a goal toward it. Swami Vivekananda puts it beautifully in his vast commentaries on Raja Yoga. Each soul is potentially divine, and the goal is to manifest this. Controlling nature, internal and external and internal. And you can do this by a number of different methods, depending on your tendency, depending on your skill, depending on your background, depending on your various individual qualities and propensities and so on and so forth. And so there's a certain democracy contained within this Vedanta. Now, there is a confusion of terms. Sometimes when I walk, and I told you this before, let us say in the city, I had a meeting today at the United Arab Emirates embassy today. And so naturally I wear the Gera cloth. And on my way, I had parked a car, and I was on my way. I was thinking I may be late. And a man stopped me in the street and asked me, this dress that you're wearing, can you explain it to me? I said, I'm sorry, I'm in a hurry. Had we stopped and had a conversation, he might have asked whether I was a member of the Krishna consciousness movement, because they dress like this also, but you see the beard gives it away, clearly not that, or am I a Buddhist? And so the art of Buddhism is that it is spread and made the word Buddhism popular everywhere. Everyone understands it. Nobody ever thinks that there is somebody, a monk, that adheres to the Vedanta philosophy. And if you say Hindu, then the vast array of confusion of the whole Indian subcontinent comes up. A whole array of gods and goddesses and complex rituals and things that sometimes to the Western mind are not really understood. And culturally, in a country that is de facto, let us say, Christian, more than that, de facto Roman Catholic, say in Ireland, then people have been brought up to understand anything outside this saving institution is really pagan, comes under the heading pagan. And when you say pagan, it goes back to all the witchcraft, and it comes with a lot of negative baggage. That's the difficulty. So how to get over this? I remember being in Chicago. 3 monks were there, 3 of us were there. We visited the place where Swami Vivekananda gave his famous lectures at the Art Museum in Chicago. And you can still go there and see the hall. And somebody was curious enough to know. Now we were all dressed in gera. I had trousers on. And so, oh, who are you? What are you? They said, we are Hindu monks. I said, I'm a Vedanta monk. And that created a small side discussion, because you see, to the Western mind, to say Hindu will be a difficult thing. So we say Vedantin, and even Swami Vivekananda prefer this term, because what holds, what welds everyone together, not just in India, but throughout the world, if we are to take Vedanta seriously, if it's a universal, cohesive thing, then it has no ism to it. In other words, it is neither Christian, nor is it Hindu, nor is it Buddhist, nor is it this, nor is it that, nor is it Muslim. None of these classifications, because it is none of these and yet all of them. Just as the ocean is the fundamental essence of all waves. And so it is a philosophy. But is it a living philosophy? So we have to get away from the intellectualism, in a sense. Swami Vivekananda, commenting on Buddha and Buddhism in his Parliament of Religions talks, he said that Hinduism needed Buddhism and Buddhism required Hinduism. Why? What was he saying? He was saying that Buddhism has to have the depth of philosophical, metaphysical thinking of the ancient rishis. So clear. But, you see, if one of your sections is tied up with orthodoxy in a different sense, to do with customs and rituals and traditions, and the way you say this or the way you say that, or the way you do this or the way you do that, if that is your world comprising religion, then we say this is orthodox, but you see, it is not orthodox from the point of view of adhering to the glue, namely that portion of the Vedas which is universally applicable and acceptable to everyone. So what characteristics would we ever see if we were to find somebody who was the embodiment, a living example of the Vedanta philosophy? If we say that the Vedanta philosophy is completely universal, comprising really of only 3 things, there is only one existence. That one existence we call Brahman. That the essential entity in you is one with this, is our final conclusion. We don't miss any words about it. It is one with this. We're just using 2 different terms in 2 different contexts. And that this world is mithya, it's only apparitional. If we say it's only apparitional, there are reasonable grounds for saying it, because if there was only one, which is an absolute, the relative world which comes and goes is just like an apparition. It is less like an illusion. It comes and goes. And the real elusive part of it, or delusive part of it, is that we take it to be absolutely real and permanent. We build our whole structure of our whole lives around the one thing that we deem as real in the reality. That is, that our small circle, our small bubble, is the only thing, and it's going to last forever, and it won't. That is why we get a shock when it bursts, or another bubble bursts, when a dear one departs. Then we get a tremendous, tremendous shock. We go into a state of bereavement. We experience a loss. because we didn't see the totality of the picture. So who sees this totality? That's a great question. Most of the teachings of Vedanta, all the teachings of Vedanta, there are supplementary teachings on it as well, but we can say that the three authoritative texts on Upanishads will be the mother of all these Vedanta teachings, and that is why the Upanishads themselves are called Vedanta. Upanishad means, or is said to mean, is sitting near. Upani, sitting near. Sitting near, we visualize sitting near a teacher. We may even think that the student is sitting at the feet of the teacher. Why is that? It's because you cannot convey these truths in actuality, not just in principle, in actuality, through books or talks or any of these things. It has to be revealed within you. There has to be enough clues to drive you, motivate you toward this inner discovery. And so Arjuna asks this very important question. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads I mentioned, the second text we take is the Bhagavad Gita, extracted from Mahabharata, but it is a kind of collection of the flowers of the Upanishads, and every chapter declares it as an Upanishad, a Shastri, a Yoga Shastri, a scripture on the practical implementation of Vedanta. The third part would be the consolidation and coordination and systematization of these Upanishads, these teachings, that is often called Vedanta Sutras or Brahma Sutras. This is what we call Prasthanatraya, the three scriptural bases for this Vedanta. This is all therefore, we've discussed is the principle. What does the living aspect of it look like? Arjuna Vacha, Stita Prajnasya Ka Bhasa, Samadhista Dedasya Kesha, Stitadihi Kim Prabhasita, Kim Asita Rajita Kim. What is the mark, the sign of someone of steady wisdom? We have to explain what steady wisdom means. So in the opening question, somebody said, my mind is not steady. That was the purport of his question. Yes, but is wisdom steady also? Knowledge is not necessarily steady, nor is it the same as wisdom. We can have knowledge over something, power over something, but how we use that power, that's something different. At a small meeting or conference, I suppose, that I had today, it was really to do with a movement, an annual movement toward coordination and peace. And a lot of studies have been done on it. One statistic that came out said that something like $200,000 billion are being spent on defense in the world. If we would take a few billions and dedicated them toward feeding the poor, let me explain, 10%, this was another statistic that came out, 10% are starving of the world's population. That's a huge amount. And 2/3 of the world's population are undernourished. This was an astonishing statistic. Now you may say, what are we doing about it? Well, firstly, most of us are unaware of it. If we were aware of it, even then we'd be hard-pressed to do something about it. But why should we do something about it? I made a small comment. If you want mercy, if you want peace, if you want these kinds of values, if you want a movement toward compassion and so on, at the very deepest level, beyond the skin deep level, that is, we really have to evaluate the full humanity of man. The one person, the ambassador, mentioned, we should think more positively. We should think that our glass is half full rather than half empty. And I said, that's a good analogy because I don't agree with it, because why shouldn't the glass always be full and overflowing? Why shouldn't we access the abundance that is our human nature beyond the skin deep value of it and see our divinity, our full divinity? This is what Vedanta is about. Now, if we did that and saw that, this would be living Vedanta. Living Vedanta means taking these principles and on the basis of this understanding that underneath everything is pure spirit, then we should have a penetrating vision that goes to the heart of things. And our automatic response will be one of compassion. Even if we take the human various layers and parts and have compassion for the suffering physical, those who are starving, doing something about it. Now, we can't change the whole world, but we can change our local area, there's no doubt. And who are we to criticize or change something without making ourselves steady? So the first thing we have to do is ensure that we are steady in our wisdom. Sthita prajna, steady wisdom. Somebody whose wisdom is steady, not erratic, not giving advice one moment, destroying it the next, not vacillating in our approaches. So where does this steady wisdom come from? It comes from the acknowledgement of our divine true nature. If we find it in us, we find it everywhere. So I'm curious, says Arjuna, on behalf of us all, the person of steady wisdom, merged in the highest form of concentration, the samadhi, in other words, merged in this unity. How does that person of steady wisdom, how do they speak? We would expect them to speak in a different way. Well, they would speak, obviously, in a kind, uplifting way. They would speak in a way that has the effect of transforming everyone, surely. There would be a light that leaves a sense of joy behind it. They would contribute toward a person's shining eyes. They would contribute toward the upliftment of smiles. Such a person would be there, not downhearted, not miserable, not saying the glass is half empty, not even saying it's half full, but saying it's all full and abundant and overflowing. Your nature is immutable, unchanging, is infinite, is blissful. If we can see that, then we are living Vedanta. So that is why it is emphasized in all Upanishads that we have to see this divine self in all beings and all beings in the divine self. A very simple formula. See God everywhere, put it in theological language. See God everywhere, that requires imagination. And then the rest will follow, because if you see it, then empathy develops, compassion develops, love develops, service develops, worship develops. Automatically it's there. So how does he speak? How does he sit? Is he restless? Is this person walking all over the place? How does he walk? I'm always impressed by the Christian Benedictine tradition. Just as an example. Because, for example, when they go into matins or vespers or what have you, they don't just rush there. Some do, but mainly they have a way of pacing themselves, of walking mindfully. I always remember seeing a visual exhibition of a Buddhist monk walking. And if you didn't wait for a while and watch it carefully, you would swear this man never moved. Yet he was moving, but extremely slowly. And the contrast was there was all kinds of activity and noise around him. It didn't bother him in the midst of everything. Can you have steady wisdom in the midst of a busy city, in the midst of, say, Grafton Street? Yes. Can you have disturbance while sitting alone? Yes, if you're not trained properly. Can you have peace of mind? Can you resort to that inner poise everywhere, regardless of your surroundings? Yes, this is somebody of steady wisdom. So how does he sit? How does he walk? And the Lord replies like this, Shri Bhagavano Acha, Prajahati Yata Kaman Sarvan Partha Manogatam Atmanyevatmana Tushta Stita Prajnas Tadochyati. When a person completely casts away all the desires of the heart. Now, is that easy? No. When we see what desires we have, in the heart means emotionally or deep-rooted. And when we think of desires, we think of external things, possessions, for example, or a desire for clothing, or desire for maybe a relationship, or many things are there. But these all come from the inner mental movement of desire. A general feeling that there is an inner inadequacy within us, some kind of gap that we need to fill from the outside. And that means that the person of steady wisdom doesn't have that feeling. They feel always full and fulfilled, nothing more to gain. And they feel this fullness everywhere, and they glory in it, nothing more to get. So desires of the heart, then it says, you see, Atmanyeva, the self, being satisfied in what? In the self alone. When you say self, in English is written the capital S, Atman, is how it's written, self. But Atman says it's not the psychophysical self. It is the innermost self, that divine self in Christian language, that king or heaven within, that divine entity that sits within, without which nobody can move or breathe, the eyes don't shine, nothing is there. It is the source of life. It is life itself. So being satisfied in this self alone, then he is said to be one of steady wisdom, because what is upsetting the wisdom, if we compare it to a flame blowing in the wind, for example, then it is a restless thing. The mind is restless by its nature, and it's steady when it understands, when it's tuned into this glory of the divine self. And so he whose mind is not perturbed by anything. Dukesva anudvignana manaha sukeshu vigataspraha vitaraga bhaya krodha stita dhir munir uchite. The person whose mind is not perturbed by any adversities, any winds of change, any sudden change in direction in our life. In other words, no stress. Life is full of adversity. It's its nature. Get over it. When I say get over it, I'm not dismissing it. I'm simply saying acknowledge it being there and find a way around it nicely. Not perturbed by adversity because they're seeing this divine self everywhere. Who doesn't long for things like happiness? Everyone longs for happiness. If only I had this, I'd be happy. Then when you get it, you say, well, okay, maybe more happiness is there around the corner. The grass is always greener, on the other side, so the saying goes. And endlessly it goes, like fueling the fire all the time, creating a sense of dissatisfaction and restlessness. I want, I haven't got. This is the eternal mantra, which is counterproductive. If you say I want, means I haven't got. You won't get anything. But if you say I'm full and free continuously, there's nothing else. I don't long for happiness. So who is free from passion, an emotional state, which really is desperate to fulfill the desire? And the counterpoint to that will be fear. I want to get some kind of happiness because I fear the absence of it. I want a good life. I want health because I fear illness. I want mental stability because I fear stress. I want good relations because I fear people won't like me. And so we have this counterpoint always. These desires are there. When we do the Enneagram, we come across each personality having a desire, and a counter to that would be a fear. A desire to feel worthwhile. A fear of being neglected. You can see that. A fear of being overwhelmed. A desire to know everything, to be on top of my environment, as it were. So all of these things are there. It's more subtle than desiring something in the external world. And this is acknowledged. And then if we don't get what we want, what happens? Krodha, anger. Anger is a generic term. It means it can be an outburst of frustration against somebody or against ourselves. Or it can be a small version of it, a sense of frustration. But the whole world is made from frustration. That's how it runs. It runs on frustration because there has to be a fulfillment everywhere. The whole universe is moving to get its fulfillment, and there are obstacles in the way. So we have to have an approach which is different. And part of that difference is viewing this life in its relative aspect as a kind of series of waves, a kind of sport. He who is without attachment for anything, who neither rejoices when receiving good, nor is dejected by evil, firmly fixed in wisdom. And also when that person completely withdraws the senses from their objects, has the capacity to do that, like a tortoise draws its limbs, then that wisdom is stable. In other words, by themselves, in meditation, we can do what yogis call pratyahara, withdrawing your attention from the external, withdrawing it from the mind also, and entering into the inner place of peace and serenity. When this happens, all the sense objects fall away from this person. Even though they're there, attachment to them is gone. There's no taste for them anymore, and even the taste ceases when the Supreme is realized. Like when the sun shines and rises, all the darkness automatically is dispelled. It doesn't have to pack its bags and go off to the west. And what's in the way? The turbulent senses are in the way. They forcibly carry away the mind. And even of a wise person, they can do it. We always have to be vigilant. And the yogi, that is the person who has the sense of practical application of the principles, having controlled them all, fixes his mind on that one reality. In this case, Krishna identifies as me. His wisdom is steady, whose senses are under control is the bottom line on it. Then what is the psychological profile that happens? Brooding on the senses is the first thing. And when you do that, you get a sense of attachment to them. And it's very subtle. And the attachment comes from a desire for fulfillment of some kind. And when the desire is not fulfilled, from desire, anger comes. And anger is very destructive. Anger comes from delusion. And from delusion, you get a kind of confused memory, a loss of your discernment, a ruin of your discrimination. All reasoning is gone. And from that, of course, you perish. If you make that habitual, you may add. But the contrary to that, if you have this element of systematic discipline required to make a living Vedanta, then you can move freely among all the objects, it doesn't matter, with the senses under control, free from attraction and aversion, these pairs of opposites. When you do that, you're now in a state of tranquility, even though you're facing all the same difficulties, so-called, but you don't classify them anymore as difficulties. You have a reevaluation of the whole thing. That makes the Vedanta philosophy practical here and now in this day and age. in tranquility, when you've attained this, then all your sorrows are destroyed. Because the intellect of the tranquil-minded soon becomes established in the self. When you control the mind and make it tranquil, remove all the stress from it. When that state of stress-free existence is there, then the self is revealed by itself. Be still and know that I am is a wonderful statement that encapsulates this sense. For those who have no control over this mind, then there's no spiritual understanding. And there's an impossibility to meditate. If you want to meditate, go and get peace of mind. And without meditation, there's no peace. Without peace, how can one have happiness? The deep encounter with your own divine self at the deepest, most level comes in meditation. It's not possible unless you have controlled the mind. So the first thing is control your outlook, control your mind in the midst of all your activities. We have no rights according to the Bhagavad Gita, only the right to work, because nothing belongs to us. That kind of revaluation has to be there. So in the discussion today about all the difficulties of the world, the military expenditure in the world, the lack of food, I made this comment. You see, the source of it is selfishness. The source of it is this exaggerated attention to our own needs, regardless of others. Without that, how can you have the mercy that is required, and the peace that is required, and the hope that is required? It was a variation on faith, hope, and charity. And the speaker, who did much research, has done much research in the area of unity and compassion worldwide and so on, mentioned these three terms: mercy, hope, and peace. Well, it starts with yourself. It starts with your own inner awakening. Because how can you really assist someone else unless you're in a condition to do so? And so this necessity is there: self-control, meditation, peace, happiness. These things follow one after the other according to the Bhagavad Gita. Well, let's have another look then at what is the Vedanta philosophy and how can it work as a living philosophy. Some time back, maybe it was last week, I mentioned a beautiful talk by Swami Vivekananda in San Francisco on April 8th, 1900. And he asked this question, and the subject matter is Vedanta the future of religion, the future religion? And I got a question. A person listened to the talk, and the question went, I'm confused, can you clarify this? So I said, all right, I'll do my best. So the lecture is a beautiful lecture. And Swami Vivekananda has the skill of saying something immediately which wakes you up. He is a master speaker. So he says, he starts off like this: those of you who have been attending my lectures for the last month or so must by this time be familiar with the ideas contained in the Vedanta philosophy. Because all he's teaching in the West is the Vedanta philosophy. In other words, Upanishads. That's all he's teaching. He says, I teach only the Upanishads, and of that I teach this one value of strength. He's not teaching Ramakrishna or Krishna or Buddha or Saraswati or any of these aspects. He's teaching the Vedanta philosophy. He's teaching something that is applicable to everyone, and everyone can relate to it automatically. So he says that Vedanta is the most ancient religion of the world. Now he's using the term religion. So what does he mean? Because his subject is Vedanta the future religion? He says, but it can never be said to have become popular. Vedanta is not popular. Vedanta wasn't popular in the past. Will it ever be popular in the future? Now I'll just preempt some of his conclusions. Vedanta is a very democratic system. And he points out that for a religion to thrive and be successful, an element of fanaticism has to be there, which claims an exclusivity, an exclusive book, an exclusive idea of God, an exclusive principles, dogmas, doctrines, a kind of superiority aspect that says you're all wrong, there can only be one thing that is right. On those grounds, Vedanta will be too democratic. And because it says you have the constitutional right, indeed, the necessity to express yourself in individual ways. We're not going to disturb that. We're not claiming any exclusivity. We're going to the foundation. What is the foundation? Equality is the foundation. When you go to the level of spirit, it is all equal. There's no difference anywhere. And if you apply this in a practical way with this outlook, won't you then automatically provide this mercy, this hope, and this peace that is being touted as the virtuous principles necessary to solve the world's problems? So he continues, therefore the question is it going to be the religion of the future? It's very difficult to answer, he says. So at the start he says, I may tell you that I do not know whether it will ever be the religion of the vast majority of people. And it never was really, because only a select few have the courage, the ability, and the insight to see things in a different way. Now, being students of the Vedanta, you have the great advantage. You are among those select few, but it has to be taken out from the principles living in the head to the practices living in the heart. Then he goes on to say what Vedanta is not. It's not something that has this exclusive book. It's not something that has this veneration of a person, an individual, whether it's a prophet or incarnation. It doesn't have any of that. Because when you have that, for example, if you take the personality of Jesus away from Christianity, Christianity collapses. If you take Buddha away from Buddhism, well, you might find some survival, depending on how you interpret Buddha. But you see, there's a reason why it's called Buddhism. If you take Muhammad away from Islam, then the great ideal of man, even though Muhammad is deemed to be a prophet, he's also deemed to be an ideal man. And the Quran is deemed to be the infallible book. If you take these two away, what religion do you have left? And so it goes on. So these are the characteristics that make for a successful religion. So what he's doing is he's taking away, stripping away all the things that mitigate against Vedanta as a religion. Then he's saying, so it's not exactly a religion, even though it's been called this. But we also have to take note of what he means by religion. He means realization. Realization. Religion really only starts with your inner journey, when you go from the outside to the inside. If you cut off the point of Sunday consumerism, if you put that underline there and don't go any further, stick only to Sunday worship or whatever it is, then you're not going on your inner journey. When you start going on the inner journey, religion starts, realization starts, revelation starts. Anyway, he goes on that the third requisite seems to be that religion, to be strong and sure of itself, must believe that it alone is the truth. There's a famous section of the Vatican Council of the 1960s called Nostrae Aetate. It's a very, very liberal document. Liberal to the point where it's saying, we recognize that there is truth in all religions. Even those religions that they previously had condemned as pagan mentioning Hinduism, Buddhism, and so on. But then it won't go as far as saying that it is one of many. It says, but this church of ours has the fullness of truth. And therein is the sticking point, still an exclusiveness. I said at today's meeting was the Malaysian ambassador. We were talking along these lines. I said, well, you see, it's like taking tea. You can take tea with your enemy, or you can say, I will never take tea with my enemy. I would just avoid it. Or you can say, I'll take tea with my enemy, but you see, you still have an enemy. This is called toleration. Because he was talking about toleration, and I was talking about acceptance. Or you can say, I'm pluralistically minded. I'll take tea with anyone because I don't have any enemy. I see the glory of the divine self everywhere. Does it mean you have to be a fool with it? No. It means you play the game well, but you always have the attitude of adoration and worship. So Vedanta doesn't believe in any of these teachings. It doesn't believe that any person's book is more special than another. It doesn't believe that any personality is more special than another. It doesn't believe that its institutional religion is more special than anyone else. It believes in democracy because everyone is reduced, as it were, or dissolved, as it were, into their own essence, which is spirit. And our error is when we don't see it. So no book, no man to worship, nothing like that, and fully democratic. Not like a religion that says you have to have a king, a governor. And he points out that in America, there is this element of democracy. You did away with the royalty, and you gave the governance to the people. And so, His Majesty the King has gone from this country, he says. The kingdom of heaven went from the Vedanta hundreds of years ago. India cannot give up His Majesty the King of the earth. That is why Vedanta cannot become the religion of India. A remarkable statement, because even there, you cannot give up this royal extra-cosmic entity where you have to be submissive to it. That is not to say we do away with anything else. It is there as a kindergarten structure, a necessary structure, because if we are to be all-inclusive, we have to include everything, even those dualistic systems that said, let us keep our king, please. Yes, but you cannot leave it there. You have to outgrow that. And when you outgrow it, you go broader, you go deeper. And that is what Vedanta means. And living Vedanta is doing that. So he says, they shall not hear about Christs and Buddhas and Shivas and Vishnus, none of these. He says, in Calcutta, I have all these images and temples in the name of God and the Vedas, of the Bible and Christ and Buddha. He says, let it be tried, but on the heights of the Himalayas, he says, I have a place where I am determined nothing shall enter except pure truth. This is a place called Mayavati. There I want to work out this idea about which I have spoken to you today. And then he says that there are sponsors, Englishmen, Captain Sevier is actually Captain and Mrs. Sevier, who have been in charge of a place in Almora. And the purpose is to train seekers of truth, to bring up children without fear and without superstition. One of the great critiques of today's religions is you have inserted in a vulnerable mind some ideas of your own. Much of it contains fear, much of it contains superstition, giving you a grounding which is intrinsically damaging and negative. So he says, these people will experiment. They shall not hear about Christ and Buddhas and Shivas and Vishnus, none of these. They shall learn from the start to stand upon their own feet. They shall learn from their childhood that God is the Spirit and should be worshipped in spirit and in truth. Everyone must be looked upon as spirit. That is the ideal. I do not know what success will come of it, he says. Today I am preaching the thing I like. I wish I had been brought up entirely on that, without all the dualistic superstitions. Sometimes he says, in concession, I agree that there is some good in the dualistic method. It helps many who are weak. And if a man wants you to show him the polar star, you first point out to him the bright star near it. Then a less bright star, then a dim star, and then the polar star. This process makes it easy for him to see it. All the various practices and trainings, Bibles and gods, are but the rudiments of religion, the kindergartens of religion. But then I think of the other side, he says. How long will the world have to wait to reach the truth if it follows this slow, gradual process? How long? And where is the surety that will ever succeed to any appreciable degree? It has not so far. After all, gradual or not gradual, easy or not easy to the weak, is not the dualistic method based on falsehood? Are not all the prevalent religious practices often weakening and therefore wrong? They are based on a wrong idea, a wrong view of man. Would two wrong make one right? Would the lie become the truth? Would darkness become light? He says, I am the servant of a man who has passed away. He's talking about his master, Ramakrishna. I am the only messenger. I want to make the experiment. The teachings of Vedanta, I've told you about, were never really experimented with before. And although Vedanta is the oldest philosophy in the world, it has always become mixed up with superstitions and everything else. So he's talking about the kindergartens of religion, and he finishes off powerfully by saying, the hour comes when great men shall rise and cast off those kindergartens of religion and shall make vivid and powerful and true religion, the worship of the Spirit by the Spirit. This is the remarkable thing that Buddha taught also. It's a remarkable thing that no doubt Jesus taught. But the difficulty is in all the followers who interpret things in their own way. And so we have to consider these ideas. But the main thing is, these are just principles unless we put something into practice, unless we understand that the principle is a living, real principle. You are all spirit, pure spirit, nothing more, nothing less. And so you should worship in spirit and in truth everywhere. So with that, I finish off. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace beyond all. Thanks. And also I should mention before I go that there is the opportunity for the silent retreat in Dalgan Park coming up next month. I'm giving you advance warning, like 4 weeks warning, so that you can, if you're interested, you can book up. And the reason why that needs to happen quite early is because we have to advise the Dalgan Park about numbers and booking rooms and so on and so forth, those kinds of practical things. So that's the 21st, 22nd and 23rd of June. And those of you who have been on this process before will probably understand the great value of this. All right. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.